Hello and welcome. I don't know how this works. I feel like people can't be like waiting, and so as soon as we launch, they're right in right away. I feel like it opens and then people can join, but I'm not sure if anyone's here right at the launch. But if you are, welcome. This is the This is Not Therapy Hour. I am Brandon Tessers. I am a licensed therapist, but this is not therapy. That's why we call it the This Is Not Therapy Hour. With me today is Cecil Ellison. Together we work as part of a practice called Effective Artistry that provides individual and group therapy, as well as individual executive functioning coaching. And excitingly, we are in the process of launching some specific groups, some of which are therapeutic groups, some of which are more executive functioning oriented, based around specific kind of frameworks. So I'm very excited right now about the fact that we'll be launching a narrative therapy, social skills, and executive functioning development group based around playing Dungeons and Dragons in a weekly format in the group, and then working with a therapist for individual sessions throughout in between things. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today, we're here to answer any questions that we have. And as always, we pick a theme. The theme this week is task initiation, how to get started doing things. That's not the actual subtitle we said. What was the actual subtitle? How do I get started? Something like that?
I have it right here. Task initiation, how to get started.
So we always pick a theme to make it easier for people to engage and know, and we can prepare some questions, solicit some questions ahead of time so that those of you who are here watching don't have to jump in right off the bat. But feel free to jump in right off the bat or at any point asking any questions about anything, not just task initiation, even though that's the theme of this week. This is an open Q&A conversation. Did I say everything format-wise, Cecil?
Sure, because I was 100% listening and paying attention. Definitely not distracted.
I need to artificially create, because I will just talk and talk. As anybody who's been watching this knows, that's part of why I'm good at it. I like talking, but I need to create breaks for myself to be able to take a sip of my tea. What do you think, Cecil?
Oh,
no, you need a drink too. All right, talking about task initiation today. So we'll start with a little bit of an overview, unless anybody in the chat jumps in with a question right off the bat, and then we'll get into questions. So executive functioning is a kind of umbrella term for a set of processes, abilities, strategies, whatever. It depends on who is using the term, what exactly they mean by it. But different experts will break executive functioning down into different subcategories, call it subfunctions, call it categories, labels, whatever, skills. And initiation is one of those pretty commonly. So different experts break it down differently. Some have as few as 3, some have as many as 28, 33, But task initiation is a pretty common one across different kind of models of how to break down executive functioning, and there's a reason for that. But I'll say that it's probably one of my least favorite categories, my least favorite ways of breaking down executive functioning, because I don't find it super useful. I find it very useful for one thing, and we'll talk about that in a bit, and other than that, not very useful. But initiation, what we're talking about is I have an intention to do a thing. In particular, I have an intention to do a thing now. I want to start doing a thing or do a thing now, and I am not starting, right? And this is why I don't super love initiation, because it's a very kind of ex post facto thing, that the only way to know if you're struggling with initiation is if you intend to start a thing and don't. So if you're trying to start a thing but don't, then we say it's a struggle with initiation. If you intend to start a thing and do, then we say you're not struggling with initiation, right? But it is very useful for one thing, and this is that thing, which is to separate desire or intent to do a thing from doing a thing. Because without the concept of initiation as an executive functioning skill set, subfunction, whatever, then what people tend to assume is if you're doing a thing, it's because you want to, and if you're not doing a thing, it's because you don't want to. And if you say you want to do a thing, but you're not, you probably don't really want to, or you don't want to enough. And that's where we get this generic advice of you just got to want it more, care more, or that we even say to ourselves of, I've got to just get myself to do it. I've got to make myself do it. which can work. Both the advice and what we say to ourselves can get us to do it, but in a way that we don't really understand. Because what do we really mean when we say care more or get myself to do it? How do I marshal my energy, my resources? Ultimately, executive functioning is about managing my resources. How do I get myself to do it? If it works, great. If it doesn't, then we want to be able to talk about it as separate from intent, separate from will or desire, that the reason that you're not starting is an executive functioning deficiency, an executive functioning issue, as opposed to just not wanting it enough. So it's wonderful for that. And that's why part of the reason it's so common, because it's very helpful for us all to understand that, yes, there are times that I do want to do a thing and yet cannot get myself to. Not because I don't want it, but because there's an actual struggle, right? So it's great for that. And we will talk about, different various things to do to help with initiation, because it's useful as a category to discuss in that way, to say, under the umbrella of, I want to do a thing, but I'm having a trouble getting myself to actually start doing it. The other thing is that it separates the beginning of doing a thing from the process of doing a thing. So there's lots of things where it's like, I know if I can just get started, I'll be able to do this thing well, I'll be able to do it quickly, I'll be able to do it in one sitting. It's the starting part that's the problem, not the actual doing of the task itself that's the problem. So that's what we're focused on today. Tonight we're doing a webinar on motivation, which is a word that often gets intertwined with initiation, but of course often means other things as well. And anybody who's interested in joining that, it's a Zoom webinar, so that when you're actually like in the Zoom call and participate, if anyone's interested, let us know, and we'll post the link, or we'll probably post the link anyway, right?
Sure. So you talk about initiation and motivation as separate ideas, but yet we are often like, they're kind of lumped together, and the term like laziness is associated to both of those. Like, how does that play into this?
Thank you for setting me up for something I love to rant about, Cecil. I hate the word laziness. I hate it. It's one of few words that I don't, it's not that I don't allow it in my household. That makes me sound more authoritarian than I am, but I don't like the word and I don't want it used. You can call me any kind of a thing, but lazy will bother me. Call me stupid, I don't care. Call me ugly, I don't care. Call me lazy, I will be bothered. And some of that is because of past experience, right? I was going to say trauma, because for some people this is a traumatic thing. Trauma is a term that like a lot of the terms we talk about, has kind of an arbitrary cutoff, meaning that everything we experience affects who we are and how we make decisions and how we think and behave later. Some things affect it more than others, and some things affect us more than others because of how difficult and painful they are. And at a certain point, we call that trauma, right? So I didn't want to use that term because I don't want to appropriate the term or make anyone feel that their trauma is less valid because I'm saying that being called lazy is traumatic. But for some people, it is. Whatever works for you is the way to go with it. Anyway, I hate the word lazy because of this. Laziness does not exist. It's not a thing. It's not a thing that we can measure. It's not a thing that we can predict. Again, it's something that's used ex post facto, after the fact. If I struggle, if I intend to do a thing, if I think I should do a thing, I declare to others that I have an intention to do a thing and then don't, put it off, whatever. Then if I don't understand why, what's happening, or if others don't understand why, we use lazy as a placeholder to say that's why, because of laziness. But there is no personality trait of laziness that one person has more of than another. And I could talk about this forever. I have a long history with this word. But there's actually a great article out there titled "Laziness Does Not Exist." And I believe the author of that article, whose name I don't remember at the moment, is either in the process of writing a book or wrote a book, which I love because I've been saying that phrase for a decade now. And so finding somebody else like going more into detail about it is very validating.
What was that article called again?
Laziness Does Not Exist. It's written by a professor. I can't remember if they're a former professor or still a professor, talking about their students. And it's wonderful. It's a long article. What's that?
Is it by Devin Price?
Maybe. I don't remember the name. I'm sorry. I'll have to look that up and we can post a link or something in the comments of this when we post it as a VOD. But I don't want to get into like a philosophical debate with people about whether laziness is a thing or not. So here's the easy to accept version of laziness does not exist, which is laziness is never the reason a thing didn't get done, because there's always a more accurate, more precise reason. Laziness is a placeholder term for us when we don't know the more accurate, more precise reasoning, or don't care to put in the effort to get to know the more accurate and more precise reasoning. Laziness allows us to just cut it off and say, oh, that's why. So next time I'll just try to be less lazy, which is not a thing that you can very effectively do. So it's not very useful.
Cool.
That didn't answer your question. I was just ranting about lazy. What was your question, Cecil?
I mean, it kind of was. It's the idea of like, how does like, how does laziness fit into these terms with initiation and motivation? And I think you addressed that, right? See?
I don't know. If I didn't, somebody ask me more to clarify. Yeah, we want to know why. Sometimes we don't do a thing because we don't want to do a thing. And when I say I don't want to do a thing, I mean there's nothing connected to this thing that I want. And that's pretty rare, because when there's nothing connected to a thing that I want, I'm usually not even aware of it or have never set an intention to do it in the first place. So I don't think about it. If I enjoy doing the thing in and of itself, then I'm usually going to have an easier time getting started on it. Obviously, there are exceptions to that, especially when my resources are being expended on other things, and that even though I like this thing, I just don't have what I need in order to do it, energy-wise, time-wise, knowledge, skill-wise, whatever. I lost my train of thought already because I started thinking about painting for some reason there.
Easily. I mean, I don't know if this is weird. Well, I'll let you. Sorry, go back to it because
no. Please help me, Cecil.
I'm talking about it kind of like ties back into motivation. But that's why I think I'm wrong in that. But
intent, right? So sometimes I don't do a thing because I don't want to do a thing for any reason. Mostly, though, we're talking about the gray area where there's a thing that the thing in and of itself is not an enjoyable thing to do, that I don't enjoy this experience, but it's important to me because it's connected to something else that I find valuable. And sometimes, yes, it's my job and I get paid for it. And sometimes that's, if I, plant seeds in the garden today, even though I don't like it, I'll have flowers a month from now and I'll love that. Sometimes it's an intrinsic reward of it. And sometimes it's, if I do this, people will be happy with me, or if I don't do it, people will be disappointed with me. And that's a valid thing too. There's nothing wrong with any reason that you have for wanting to do a thing. Of course, we always take it back to cost and value. So when I say I don't want to do a thing, if you hear me reference that, what I'm using that to mean usually is not only do I not want to do this thing, but the things that are connected to it that it will get for me, or that I believe it will get for me, I don't care about those things either. We probably won't talk about that a lot. Whereas opposed to I don't enjoy this thing, I don't enjoy the experience of this thing, means this element of it I don't like and I don't want to do, but I believe there's a good reason for me to do it.
Okay. Which brings us to a question. It's like, how do I get started on going to the dentist? I don't have a dentist yet or insurance, but I really need to go see one soon.
I love this question because, first of all, it's specific, so we can get specific in answers, and I like being able to get specific. But also because it's so clear-cut as an initiation thing. So I love that they added the second part, I don't have a dentist yet or insurance, right? So when I'm struggling with initiation, when I'm feeling lazy, right? When I'm struggling with initiation, motivation, call whatever you want. We're going to say initiation from now on. There can be many reasons that I am struggling to get started on the thing that I want to get started on, that I have an intent to get started on. And so we're going to try and break that down into various common reasons. And one that's very big is that there's research involved, meaning that I'm thinking of the task as doing the task, but I don't actually know how to do the task. So before I can do the task, I have to actually do research to figure out what it is that I'm supposed to do the task. So if you tell me, silly example, but if you tell me to build a house, I have no idea how to do that. I've built things in the past and I can hammer things and whatever, but there's way more complexity involved than that, right? I know, for example, that I would need to start with a blueprint, and I have no idea how to do that. So if I was going to do that, I'd really have to start by doing a ton of research and learning, figuring out what tools that I need and purchasing those tools and learning how to use those tools. A CAD thing to draw the blueprint. I'd have to learn the laws and zoning and blah, 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 right? Before I could even approach step one of actually building the house. And all of that work, while helpful and necessary, doesn't return an immediate value. Yes, it gets me closer to being able to build a house, but I could do all the research in the world and I have no more house than I had when I started doing the research. Whereas if I ask someone to build a house that builds houses, that already knows how to do it and already has the tools to do it and experience in doing it, well, then the first step for them is to get started in whatever their process is. Anything that we do regularly, right? We'll put it in terms of career. There's a reason that careers have jargon associated with them that to outsiders seems weird. And I don't, when I say career, I mean employment. I mean doing a thing for money. I'm not separating white collar or blue collar or part-time or whatever. I just mean doing a thing for someone who's paying you, right? There's always jargon. I don't care what thing we're talking about, whether it's being a lawyer where there's all kinds of legalese, whether it's being a busser, which I have been in the past, and there's still jargon about like what table number means what table in the restaurant, and put that in the whatever spot. There's I don't know why this always pops in my head, that joke from Friends of put the trays in the tray spot, and she thinks that tray spot means like a club that everybody goes to, and so she's not putting her trays in the right spot. So in other words, this person, whoever's asking this question, doesn't know how to go to the dentist, and that's a big part of the reason that they're struggling. Are there other variables? Probably, of course, but this is a big one. I'm going to guess that this person doesn't know how much it costs to go to the dentist, that they don't know. So I don't have a dentist yet or insurance. So I don't know if that means that they don't have insurance at all, or if they don't have dental insurance, and if they don't know whether or not it would be more cost effective to begin the process of finding insurance or adding dental insurance to their current insurance in order to cover going to the dentist, or more cost effective to just go to the dentist and pay out of pocket. If they're going to get insurance, how do they do that process? How do they compare these things? And once they have insurance, then do they need to go to a specific dentist? If they don't go the route of having insurance, then do they need to go to a specific dentist, and how do they find them, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, I mean, when you say it like that, it's surprising they don't just do it. It seems so simple. Just do all those things all at once.
Yeah, well, here's a particular block that comes out, and I don't know if you were deliberately setting me up for this, Cecil, but either way, very well set up.
Well played.
There's a particular block that gets in the way of this particular thing when I don't have the knowledge that I need. And again, not binary. Nothing is binary. With any amount of knowledge, I can get started, because getting the extra knowledge is the part of getting started, right? But it's about how much it costs, how easy or difficult it will be, how many of my resources it will take. This is a particular block that's very common, especially with people who exist outside the norm, people who are neurodivergent, people who are LGBT, people who are, BIPOC, whatever. Anyone who's outside the norm, it's more difficult, but it can be difficult for people who are normative in every way too, if any such people exist. Which is to admit that you don't know. See, the phrasing of this question, that's why I like the phrasing of this question. How do I get started on going to the dentist? Not how do I figure out what I need to do in order to go to the dentist? The block is being phrased as doing it. This person is telling themselves, as revealed by their language, that, oh, I know what I need to do. I just need to do it. I can't get myself to do it. And maybe they have an idea of some parts of the process, right? Like, I know I need to call a dentist and make an appointment, but they're not paying enough attention to what are the steps that need to happen before that. So they keep focusing on, why am I not doing that? Well, you don't know how to do that. And so really you need to get yourself to do the research earlier to be able to move up to that spot. We have a hard time admitting that we don't know things. In this culture in particular, and I am born and raised in America, so that's the culture I'm, submersed in, and that's the one that I'm talking about. But I think that this generalizes to kind of Western, American, European, Canadian, whatever culture. But I don't know how much of this is universal. I don't want to make assumptions, but I think there's probably some element of this in most cultures, that we apply value on having knowledge. And so to admit that I don't have knowledge, especially knowledge that's relevant to something that I find valuable, or I wouldn't be intending to do it anyway in the first place, right? This is a thing I think is important, going to the dentist, but I lack the knowledge I need in order to make it easy enough for me to do that with the resources I can spare for this task. It's hard to say I don't know. We consider it revealing weakness, vulnerability, that people will judge us or take advantage of us. So that's a particular block that we need to work past a lot of the time to become comfortable with saying, I don't know. In this case, I don't think this person knows what the process is of, should I call around to 5 different dentists? If so, what do? I just Google who's the nearest dentist to me, and then I ask them, like, how much does it cost out of pocket, or do I need insurance or whatever? And even that is revealing a lack of knowledge, because you're trying to ask. There's only 2 ways to gain knowledge you don't have. One is to experience a thing.
And by devouring your enemies.
Yeah, sure. So I don't see the connection there, but if that terminology works for you, then I support it. Mm-hmm. No, I can learn things by experiencing things, by observing my environment. And as we've talked about in the past, and we'll talk about in the future, there's all kinds of processes that dictate what of that I notice and how I interpret and process and blah, blah, blah. So that's one way. The other way is to get it from other people. This is what makes us human. This is what intellect is for. This is what language is for, is so that I can share information with you without you having to experience and discover it yourself. Whether or not you accept that, trust me, whether you utilize it or what changes it makes, whether what you're hearing is the same as what I'm intending to say, there's all other kinds of variables, but that's what it's for. And yeah, Googling counts as getting information from other people. Other people put that information there on the internet for you to find. Reading a book counts as getting information from other people. Watching a how-to video counts. But of course, the more access you can have to someone and the more knowledgeable and experienced they are with the thing you're trying to learn, the more efficient it will be. In other words, having direct access to an expert, whatever that means, someone with a lot of knowledge, is going to be more efficient than Googling around or looking in a book. But they're all various versions of asking somebody else for information. So if I was working with this person, the question I would ask next is, okay, what do you think is the first step in this process? Before I said all this, that's what I would have said. What is the first step? Break it down. And this is a very common specific exercise to work on initiation, right? Break down the task until you get to the first thing you need to do. People talk about break it into small chunks, and that's another great thing, and we'll probably talk about that. But here's a specific exercise to use. I ask the question, what do I need to do in order to do that? So, Cecil, give me an example. What's something that you intend to do, whether or not it's actually something you struggle with or not, just or made up? What's the thing you intend to do? Now, make it real. Don't make it up.
I intend to finish Puppy's shirt.
Good. What do you need to do in order to do that?
I need to just get it done.
Okay, so as soon as you hit that answer, one of 2 things. Usually it goes more than one question. Let's pick another thing and see if we can go further than one question before we get to I just need to do it.
Okay. So I've got the measures. I need to put the sleeves on.
And what do you need to do in order to do that?
I need to figure out how to put the sleeves on.
Okay, and what do you need to do in order to do that?
I need to find out how to build sleeves and then modify them for a dog.
And what do you need to do in order to find out how to build sleeves and modify them for a dog?
There's a few things I need to, I've watched the YouTube things. I just need to make a plan and go forward with it because I'm nervous of.
Well, you shifted there. You said there was something you needed to do. Now you're saying you already did it. So that's a red flag.
Okay.
That you're acting as though watching the YouTube videos was enough to know how to do it. So let me clarify. Do you know how to do it or not?
No.
Okay. So what do you need to do in order to know how to do it? You've done YouTube videos and that got you closer, but you still have more learning to do. What do you need to do in order to do that?
Apply the knowledge that I've learned, and I don't know how to say it. I don't know if
you're
like
just trying to be synonymous with just do it, right?
No,
I just need to do it.
Like I need to build a plan, or I need to take that knowledge and translate it into a way that I feel confident taking that next step. Because like I'm just like, oh, I have that. I have the plan down. I just have so many hands about just.
What do you need to do in order to take the knowledge you have and translate it into a plan?
I don't know.
Okay. I like that comment. Don't be afraid of it not being perfect. And yes, we'll talk about that for sure. You know, perfect is the enemy of good, better done than perfect. There's a lot of like sayings around this. We'll get to that for sure. But let's finish this exercise. So eventually you're going to get to either the answer, I don't know, like Cecil just said, or the answer, I just need to do it. There's nothing I need in order to do it. It's just, I need to do it. All right. If the answer is, I don't know, then the next question is, what do you need to do in order to learn? And people will run out, right? Eventually you get to a point where it's, I don't know. This question enables you to be more specific and going to that next step of what it is that you could do to learn it. But sooner or later, you're going to hit a point where you might say, I don't even know how to go about finding this information. And that's why I'm here now, right? Because now I can help you to know what things you might be able to do in order to get that information. I can help you to know how to Google things. I can help you to know what books or how to find books that might help you. I can help you to find groups or teachers or instructors that might be able to help you. So if we get to I don't know, then that's what we want to do. Then that just adds an extra task, right? I don't even know how to get the information about the thing I don't know, how to do research, for example. And we start addressing that task by getting help. When we hit a thing where I don't know, it always means I have two options. I either pick a thing and start doing that thing. This is where we get into that don't be afraid of it not being perfect. Either pick a thing and go, and you'll learn from the experience. But you have to be ready to say, I know that I don't know everything I need to know in order to do this the way I want to do it. So I'm just making my best guess. And maybe that's right. And it will work out how I want. And maybe it's not. But if it's not, at least then I know and can make a better decision about where to go from there. So that's one option, experience, or the other, getting it from someone else. Asking someone, how do you even go about starting to find how to deal with insurance and finding a dentist? I know I don't have all the information I need to find a dentist. I don't even know how to get the information on how to get the information. Please help me. Right? And, frankly, this is where relationships come into play. This is where people who are lucky and privileged enough to have good relationships with their parents and have parents who are experienced and helpful can call their folks, no matter what age they are, and say, you used to book my dentist appointments. What is involved in that? Because I don't know, because you took care of it for me. I never did it. Can you tell me what it is so that I can start doing it myself? Or if you have insurance, what's that?
I mean, it's also nice about the internet too, is that like, if you don't have those relationships and resources drawn, you can always like scour the internet to find out.
And honestly, as weird as it sounds, a specific skill that you can practice. Back in the day, I feel like people threw around this term Google foo, and like you're Googling skills, learning those different search terms, how to use quotation marks to refine your searches, how to use ampersands or plus or minus signs. And I don't even know what all of them are, but learning that can help you to be able to search more effectively. As the pretty common joke is that none of us are tech experts, just some of us are better at being able to Google the answers on tech questions. There's a reason my in-laws ask me for tech help. I'm not a technician, but I can Google things until I find something that will work, or at least until I've expended enough resources to say, it's no longer worth trying to find this. You're just going to have to get something new or whatever,
No, that confidence is not easy to get, and it's not a common thing. Just the confidence to say like, oh, I don't know, let me figure out, let me find this somewhere else, It's really
Well,
difficult.
it's a lot easier to do in isolation, right? If my father-in-law asks me to fix something that I don't know how to fix, and I sit down and he's watching over my shoulder, it's a lot harder for me to Google around and click on like old Quora links and whatever. And he'll be like, "What are you doing?" You know, like to say,
Yeah.
I'm just.
Well, first off, what are you doing
Googling.
admitting to looking at Quorum, but still.
Is Quora bad?
I mean,
I've used Quora in the past.
yeah, sure. Okay.
Now I need to know, is it
Moment?
problematic?
It's not problematic. It's just like not great, but whatever. Okay. Moving on.
Reddit to whatever, you know.
Let's cut this. They're gonna cut it.
I totally lost my place now. Oh yeah, with him standing over my shoulder, that's a lot harder because he thinks of me as a tech expert. He thinks I have all the knowledge in my head, and like I said, there's a cost associated with saying I don't know. It decreases my value in your eyes, right? Even though I know that the knowledge I have is how to find the answer as opposed to just having it, you think I just have it. So now realizing that I'm just looking it up might make you think that I'm less valuable and make you call somebody else for tech support. And I want you to think of me. Okay, I like that answer. Quora's like Wikipedia, great place to jump off, but not the best place to stop. All right, yes. I like that. That helps. So back to our exercise. What do you need to do in order to do that? Because this is all about terminology, language, just like everything else. It's helping you to get more clear until you get to an actionable step and say, I just need to do it, or get to a place where you realize I actually don't know, in which case I need to pick something and try. I hope somebody's writing this down. I should write all these. I don't write these down as models, but it is, when you get to a place where you say, I don't know, it's either pick something and try and learn through experience or find somebody to get information from. That's it. If you get to, I just need to do it, now there's two options. One is, I just need to do it means, back to this whole initiation thing where we started, there is something blocking me that I may not be aware of. If I'm saying I just need to do it, but I'm still not able to do it, there's something else I need to go for, and we kind of start back at the top and figure out what that might be under. The other possibility is that, again, I need to do it. No, not other possibility. Let me put it this way. When you get to, I just need to do it, at that point, either you do it, because getting that extra clarity of what the first most actionable step is might have now taken it from something I'm not able to initiate on to something I'm able to initiate on. In other words, going from I need to finish this shirt for my dog or what was it? Sleeves?
Yeah, the sleeves on his cowgirl outfit.
So starting from that and working it back to the more specific and actionable item of I need to take this and write it down in a plan with measurements or whatever might now enable you to initiate. So if that's the case, you can initiate in the moment, or if that moment is not good, you can pick a time. Remember, we've talked in the past about managing energy as well as time when you plan things, and try and do it then. And if it happens, great. If not, that's when we recycle. That's what I was trying to say. The two options are either you are now able to do it by having clarified, or there's still something in the way that you're not sure, and you're back to I don't know. Right. So how do I get started on going to the dentist? Oh, I should have said, by the way, cost and value. We've talked about so many times, and I don't want to reiterate it over and over. But what I'm talking about is decreasing the cost of getting started. Initiating, like anything else, is a task. And all tasks have costs, what we believe it will take from us in order to do it, and values, what we believe that it will return to us, what will change if we do it versus not doing it, in those things of which we are aware. So of course, there's a bunch of value ways, right? Like go look at your teeth, inspect your teeth very closely, and then do it again the next week and do it again the next week. And you might start to see that your teeth are going in directions you don't want them to, and that will increase the value and therefore make you more willing to get started on this. But I don't want it to be value, because then the task doesn't necessarily get any easier. It might, doing it once, forcing yourself to do it once lowers the cost. It's easier to do a thing a second time, and that might bring the cost down enough so that the next time you don't have to look at your teeth getting messed up over the course of 7 months. But we're focusing on costs here. Not to say that there aren't valuable ways to do this. For example, make a commitment to somebody else. I am going to, by the end of today, have called one dentist and asked, what's the process for setting an appointment there? And now the value is up because I don't want to disappoint that person that I just told I was going to do this. But we're going to focus more on bringing costs down and making it sustainable. I should clarify, not because it's better, but because it makes things easier to do in the long term. One-time tasks often are not very, it's not worth the resource expenditure to lower the costs. Because a lot of things that lower costs are big resource expenditures up front to create systems and knowledges and skills that make it easier ongoing. But if it's one time, sometimes it is just force myself through it, up that value, spend all those resources and get it done. If it's something I'm going to do twice a year, how often do people see the dentist? 2 to 3 times per year for the rest of my life? Then maybe it's worth making it easier to do instead of having to go through this big process every time. So yeah, with the insurance, my guess is one of 2 things, that this person is either saying, I know how to find a doctor when I have insurance because the insurance will tell me what list of people I can do, but because I don't have insurance for dental, I can't look at their list of who to go to. And so how do I find one without insurance? Or that it's about cost, monetary cost of like, I don't know how much this costs. I don't know if I can afford it or if it's worth it because I don't have insurance. Either way, not that I'm an expert in how to find a dentist, but what I would suggest is Google around, look at some reviews, find the dentist that's nearest to you, look at their website. If it feels good to you, give them a call and say, are you accepting new patients? And if so, what is that process? I don't have insurance. How much would this cost? Write these questions down on a piece of paper before you call so that when you call, you don't have to try and remember everything. Make sure you get all the information you have and record it as you're having the conversation. And if you like the answers, book it. If you don't like the answers, the money is more than you want it to be. Okay, thank you. And call the next person. And then you'll get more information about, was the money, are other places cheaper, or is everybody going to cost about the same, or was that the cheapest? Because then that will change, and maybe you'll go back and say, okay, this was more expensive than I wanted, but it's the best option and it's worth that to go. All right, maybe we should move. Oh, wait. You want to make your block smaller? Yes, I find it, well, in meaning we put that in terminology. So you want to make your block smaller was the comment. How we would phrase that is we want to reduce the cost. When we talk about cost, actually, maybe Cecil, throw this up on the stream. So I have this whole accomplishment equation, right? Cost equals criteria minus skill minus context. Ask me to repeat something if you need me to, Cecil.
Okay,
because this will show you the ways to reduce cost. Good. Cost equals criteria minus skill minus context. Criteria is the objective things that need to be done in order for the task to be considered accomplished. No task is objective, not even, I don't know, walk the dog, right? If I walk the dog back and forth across the apartment, does that count, right? Like there are definitions. So we want to be clear about what is the objective, observable things that must be accomplished in order for me to consider this task completed. And Kitchquatch says, I find it difficult to even go out the door. So if the task we're talking about is go out the door, then the criteria is to stand up, make sure you're wearing clothing that you're comfortable being outside in, walk to the door, open the door, step out, and close the door behind you, right? But obviously that's not really your task. That's the first part of a task. So we can break it down in any different kind of arbitrary way. Criteria, because cost is going to vary from person to person because of the other two variables, but criteria doesn't. When we're saying, I want to fix the car, what I mean is I want, when I turn the key for the engine to ignite and when I shift the gear to be able to press the pedals and blah, whatever detailed things, whether I do it or someone else does it might be easier or difficult, but either way, that's the things that need to be accomplished in order for me to consider the task completed. Skill is where people tend to focus a lot on how to decrease cost. Skill are the things that you have, the knowledge that you have, the abilities that you have, the experience that you have, whatever terminology you want to use, but it's the stuff that you have internal to you that follows you from situation to situation that can that assists in completing those criteria, assist in accomplishing the task. So in other words, if I've never seen it, I don't know why I'm picking this specific one, but just to make a point, I guess, if I've never seen a door before or a doorknob, it's going to be harder for me because I have less skill. It's going to be harder for me to go out the door than somebody who knows how a door works. And whether it's this door or another door with a similar kind of knob, that skill is going to follow me in those situations. That any door with a knob I know how to use is going to be easier for me to open than the one with a knob I don't know how to use. I don't know what a doorknob would look like that you don't know how to use. I guess like if you're thinking like in terms of Star Wars, there's like a control panel next to the door. That would make it it would cost more time for me to how do I open this door, right? So that's skill, the stuff that we carry with us from context to context. Context is what exists outside of us that is dependent on the specifics of this situation. And there's positive and negative contextual factors. If the door is locked and I don't have the key, that's going to make it more difficult for me to open the door, cost me more in order to get that criteria done, accomplish that task. If the door is locked and I do have the key, that's going to make it easier for me to open the door. If I have a disability that makes it so that I can't utilize, or it takes me extra resources to move my arms and hands to manipulate the door and don't have the assistive technology that I need in order to support me in it, that's going to make it cost me more. If I have assistive technology that's going to help me in it, that's going to make it cost me less. So positive and negative contextual factors. So tasks are objectively more difficult in terms of theory. Some things, like getting a car to run, involve a lot more criteria than opening a door. Even though for one person, fixing a car in one context could be easier than opening a door in another context, the criteria is higher. It's the skill and the contextual factors that then manipulate what it's going to cost an individual person. Shower taps might be a clear example.
A hotel.
Great. Now after I've used that terrible example. So all these things break down. So that's criteria where you start there. The more skill you have, that reduces cost. The more positive contextual factors you have, that reduces cost. The more negative contextual factors that you have, that increases cost. So when you say reduce the block, make your block smaller, one way to talk about that is removing or minimizing those negative contextual factors, right? So for example, if the criteria is to read a book, then that means I need to somehow get the information on the page into my head, is how we're defining this criteria for the entirety of this book, whatever book it is. Well, skill, do I know how to read? How well do I know how to read, et cetera, et cetera. If I am dyslexic, for example, and I don't super like the word skill, I'm always looking for a different word for this spot in the accomplishment equation, because a disability, specifically learning disabilities and neurodevelopmental disabilities, kind of fall under the context of skill because it follows you from task to task. It's not context dependent, right? That if I'm dyslexic, in any situation, it's going to be more costly for me to take written words and get the information into my head. But then there are contextual factors that can change that. If I have a screen reader device and I'm reading it on a computer, well, now my dyslexia is either, we can at least say less impactful, but potentially not impactful. And therefore the cost reduces, right? So sometimes it is about identifying what is it that makes this difficult and what contextual factors can I access to make it easier, or what contextual factors that are making this difficult can I just get rid of? I feel like this is so jargony. If anyone wants to help me develop better language for this. I can open a door effortless, but I just don't. Something is holding me back. Good. So now we're talking about what the real issue is in this case. Thank you, Kid Squatch. Because what you mean is physically, I'm capable of opening the door. Skill-wise, it takes me no effort to open this door. I have the knowledge that I need, the mobility that I need, the key, whatever I need to be able to physically open the door. So what that tells us then is the task is not actually about opening the door. That opening the door is part of the task. Because if really what you were trying to do is just open the door and you had everything you need to do and you wanted to open the door, more so that the value of opening the door was greater than the cost, then you would do it if you had the cost available to spend. So one possibility is that you are so drained by all the other things that you are doing that you don't have, even though it is a minimal cost, it costs me time, energy, attention, and working memory space to pick up this mug and take a sip of my tea. It is a very minimal amount of those things, but it is a cost. And if all of my resources are being spent on other things and I can't afford even that minimal cost, that might be part of what's blocking me. But I think more likely what's happening is that opening the door to get started is a task connected to other tasks. So this is where you can get in trouble. So that what do you need to do in order to do that is one exercise to use, but it won't solve every problem, because sometimes you'll know the first step, I need to open the door and go outside. And you'll know a later step, I need to get my teeth cleaned at the dentist, but you're missing some of the in-between steps. So yes, I can open the door. I'm okay with, and I know how to sit in the chair and let them clean my teeth, but I don't know the steps from between opening the door to that second part. So now all of a sudden the value of opening the door plummets, because what's the point of me opening the door if then I don't know what to do next? Then I just come back inside and it was a waste of my resources to open the door in the first place? Or then I got to figure out what to do then? Well, I can figure out what to do next after that better from here than I can after opening the door. So sometimes when I'm not ready to open the door, that's what it means, is that I don't see the point in it. There's no value to opening this door because I don't know where to go from after there. And again, sometimes you do know what the next step is, but there's other variables in that next step. Like, let's say the task is I got to go to my mom's house, right? And I know how to open the door and I know how to get in the car and drive the car and I know the way there and I know how to get out and go in and open the door and go in there and see my mom, right? But again, then it's what's next. Is that conversation, is the reason that I'm going to my mom's house, is that actually valuable to me? Do I actually want to go there enough? I may want to. I may like my mom. But it's a 17-hour drive. Do I want to talk to my mom well? And, is the value high enough to be worth the cost of driving there? I mean, my mom is 26 hours away and I've never driven to go see her. I do occasionally. Yeah. Well, that's what she would say. I do occasionally fly to go see her, but I didn't during the pandemic because the cost went up, right? Now, the value of seeing my mother didn't change during the pandemic, but the cost of doing it went up. So I went from doing it a couple times a year to not doing it for over a year. So there is that other side of it, the value too. It's not just about the cost. And remember that generally speaking, the more times you are going to have to repeat a task, the more it's worth putting in the effort to reduce the cost. The less times you're going to have to repeat a task, the less it tends to be worth putting in the effort to reduce the costs in some kind of ongoing way.
And again, one thing that's, I think it's always important to remember is, say remember 1,000 times, is this is not like a judgment on your capabilities or anything else. This is just understanding the requirements for whatever you're trying to do, more so than like, oh, I'm not good enough for this, or like it's too difficult for me. It's just understanding and exploring what it is you're trying to do.
Yeah, because too difficult for me means the cost of it is higher than it's worth. And especially if I'm looking around and everybody else is doing it and I'm not doing it, I might assume that it's because they find it more valuable. They think it's more important than I find it, and therefore something's wrong with me. But the truth often is it costs me more for some reason, especially when we're talking about disability, especially when we're talking about marginalization or lack of privilege or lack of access to resources, that it costs me more than it costs them. So even though I think it's valuable to the same extent that they think it's valuable, they do it and I don't. Because sure, it's worth an hour to write that essay, but it's not worth the 8 hours it would take me to write that essay. And then we default to increasing the value so that I get myself to be like, I just got to write it for 8 hours, as opposed to why is it taking me 8 hours when it takes other people an hour? And then there's various solutions. Talking to the people who are asking you to write the essay is my favorite one, and helping them to understand that it takes you 8 hours, and do they understand that, and do they think it's worth you doing that in return for what they think is valuable about the essay, and if so, how can they support you, and et cetera. So there's another piece here when we start to talk about projection and prediction intelligence, which is going to be our webinar in 2 weeks. Tonight's about motivation. 2 weeks is in intelligence. Intelligence at its root is about disconnection from reality, meaning the ability to take data from the environment. Reality is the things that exist outside of us. We pick up that data through sensory organs that transmit to the brain and perception. We've talked about all this in the past, right? Once it's all in there, now I'm utilizing it. I'm doing pattern recognition. I'm doing comparison. I'm doing extrapolation and interpolation, because I'm retrieving things from my long-term memory that I believe are connected to this. It's always about predicting what will come in the future. Sometimes a millisecond from now, sometimes 30 years from now, but it's always about predicting what comes next. And analysis is always an attempt to say, I believe that if I do this thing now or soon, that it will contribute to or interfere with that other thing later. It'll make that thing more or less likely. Because we can't predict the future with 100% accuracy, but we can be more or less accurate, right? That most of the time when I think this, it happens, versus somebody else when putting this and it doesn't, right? So a lot of this is about predicting. A lot of value is about predicting what do I think will happen. And there's a whole, that's why we're going to do a whole webinar on it in a couple of weeks. I don't remember why I started talking about intelligence though.
Talking about
it was right before you had said that we're not judging people for things being more or less difficult. Oh, this is what I was going to say, is that there are obviously there are exceptions to this, but as a general rule of thumb, the point behind being able to look at this equation in this way, at tasks in this way, is to enable utility, right? Enable us to do and think of different things that might help us, not to take away from any other model that already helps us, but to add new options for ways to look at things, because it's just a construct, just like anything else that people make up. Constructs have validity. We can back them up with research. We can point to things and say, when we apply this construct, most of the time people see an improvement in whatever thing they're trying to do, but ultimately they're made up. And even if 80% of the time it helps a person, well, for 20% of the people who tried it, it didn't do anything. Does that mean that the construct is invalid or inaccurate? No, it just means that it's not perfect. It's not an exact way to describe reality. It's our intellect's best ability to give us new ways to think of and predict things, right? And very, very few things are one-to-one ratios in this world. So with exceptions, generally speaking, anything that a person can do, any person can do, given the right circumstances, the right resources, the right support, the right context, etc. That a lot of the time what we're talking about, especially when we talk about intelligence, is efficiency. Is when someone says, I just can't understand math. That doesn't mean that they lack the capacity to, under any circumstances, ever understand math. That means that given the way that I have been taught math, the structure of this class, and how the teacher presents the material in the book or whatever things I'm doing, that seems to enable other people I'm looking at to be able to solve the problems that are presented to them. But all of that didn't enable me to be able to solve the problems. That doesn't mean that there's not a way that someone could present this information to me, that with enough time, with enough practice, with the right supports and assistance, that I could be able to solve those problems. And again, obviously there are exceptions to this, but we're focused on tasks mostly. So obviously I'm talking about, obvious exceptions are physical disability, right? That under no circumstances is a person who has no eyes able to see, right? But whatever tasks that sight might involve, many of those things can be accomplished with additional supports, additional resources, whatever. Is it worth getting into the nuance of that for every little thing? Of course not. Like it's going to be a lot easier to use the simplified, not as accurate binary of I can do it, I can't do it. But when something sticks in your craw, when there's something that you want to do and can't do, but you still want to, but still can't, but still want to, but still can't, and it's bothering you, that's when it's worth opening up and getting into the nuance and saying, okay, it's not that I can't, it's that in the ways that I have attained with the reason the I've had, I haven't been able to. If I really still want to do it, I need to start to investigate what I need to change in those things to enable me to do it, as opposed to I will never be able to do it under any circumstances. And of course, realistically, if we say it'll take you 1,000 years to do a thing, you're going to die before you do that. Right? Like, so obviously there are cases in which, yeah, I can't find a practical way. There's not a practical way for me to get all those resources and I could go to the moon if I had access to X million dollars and X number of engineers and whatever to put all that stuff together. Is there a practical way for me to get that and do that in the next year? No. So I'm going to say I can't do that. It's not worth getting into the nuance of that.
The important thing is you understand all the steps involved.
But I mean, like I said, if that's really my dream and my goal to go to the moon and it bothers me and it bothers me and it bothers me, cost and value, is it worth looking into over the course of my life what things I could do to work towards that goal? Maybe. And maybe I will somehow, then be able to go be a corporate robber baron. We need that $20 million to go to the moon. So now I'll do those things. Maybe. Just remember, desire is value. We can value a thing and still not do it because the cost is too high. It's higher than the value, or because even though the cost is not higher than the value, we just can't afford it. Maybe I do think it's worth $20 million to go to the moon, but I don't have $20 million. Maybe I think it's worth 1,000 years to master every language in its complete nuance, but I don't have 1,000 years. And maybe I think it is worth a couple hours tonight and whatever energy it would take to prep for my D&D game that I'm supposed to be DMing tomorrow for my friends. I do believe it's worth it. But when that time comes, if I have the time, but not the energy, I don't have the resources to do it. And then they'll all hate me, right, Cecil?
No, we do not at all. We have fun no matter what. So
I feel like we always start with a specific topic, and then I end up like ranting about, big philosophical things. Okay, we have a couple minutes, right?
Sure.
Let me give some more practical exercises, because we did the what do you need to do in order to do that thing. Another very common one is to take the task and break it down into smaller tasks, and that can work great. That's an intellectual exercise. Let me experiment, whatever. Same problem that if I hit a snag and being able to break it down before I get it to a small enough piece to be able to do, then don't go in there. But we've talked in the past, Sarah, who's often on this stream, we've talked in the past about if my goal is to work out, then I can break that down into smaller tasks, and I can, make it as small as if I put my yoga mat, if I take it out of the closet and put it on the floor, that makes it more likely that later I will move on to the next step. If I put on my workout clothes at the beginning of the day, that makes it more likely that I will move on, and more likely equates to easier, reduced costs, right? To do this thing later. If you have an issue with sequencing, which is another executive functioning subfunction, we often hit a secondary snag where you've planned out the steps and broken it down, and that's great, but now it's a 30-step plan. And even though intellectually you know the connection between step 1 and step 30, which is what you want, that when you start to engage in step 1 or attempt to engage in step 1 and it's awful, that even though intellectually you know it, because of your sequencing being inefficient, you're not holding that information present in your brain at the time. So you're doing step 1 to get to step 30, but while you're doing step 1, you're not thinking of or feeling closer to step 30. And there are things that we can do, especially like creating visual reminders, creating check-ins. Remember, what is step 30? What is it you're trying to accomplish? How much closer does this thing get you? It's going to take you how much resources, an hour, and however much energy? Well, is that worth getting that much closer to step 30 to you? In what context is it worth it? Because that changes the cost, and et cetera. Utilizing other people. We talked about, you can commit to other people to increase value, but you can also decrease cost by either having people do part of the task for you, support you in part of the task, or even just being present as you engage in the task, especially if other people are also engaging in things of a similar nature, a similar energy. It's easier in that room. The contextual value or factor makes it easier. Setting timers, obviously, making plans ahead of time and setting external reminders, whether that's from another person, that way you reduce the cost of having to remember to do a thing. A big one that's very common, people love, like the Pomodoro technique. I don't personally find value in that. I recommend it to people as a thing to try because many people find it helpful. I don't. I like to switch it. As opposed to I work for X number of time before I take a break, I like to say, okay, I'm going to start working now, but I'm giving myself permission to stop working whenever I want, even if that's 20 seconds from now. But when I stop working, the question I'm going to ask myself is, how long am I allowed to stop working before I get back to it? And I set a timer for that. So I'm going to start working. If 20 seconds from now, if 10 minutes, I have that freedom to stop whenever I want. And when I stop, then I say, I'll come back to this in 10 minutes and set a timer. And when the timer goes off, then I have 3 choices. 1, get back to it. 2, set another timer because I'm not ready to go back to it yet. Or 3, decide I'm no longer going to do this thing. Like, yeah, I thought it was important, but now I've changed my mind and new context and whatever, and I no longer want to do this. So I'm not going to extend the timer, and I'm not going to get back to work on it. But those are your 3 choices. Saying I'll do it tomorrow, well, then set a timer for tomorrow or whatever.
Cool.
Some practical things. I'm trying to fit it all in at the end.
Yeah.
Maybe that makes it easier to clip it as like a 2-minute, like, here's some things to do to help with initiation.
Cool. We are Effective Artistry. Thank you for joining us here. You'll find us here every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time for This Is Not Therapy Hour. We welcome any questions. Feel free to contact us at any time at effectiveartistry.com, including submitting questions. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at EF_artistry. Do what?
Link for the webinar too.
On this. Yeah, if you go to our webpage, effectiveartistry.com, you'll see it's it is, I know this. I'm not having to Google it right now.
I don't. I haven't been to our website in a while. But it's on the website. Cecil will find it. I'm vamping, stalling for time until he finds it.
Yeah, I totally found this. Oh, wrong banner.
I do intend to prepare for my D&D game tomorrow. But I've done some of that by upping the value, by making commitments to people. I'm now working on doing it by decreasing the cost, like buying a book that has certain pre-made things that I can tap into to utilize in my custom-made thing.
Spoiler alert. Cool. So you could find that it's the Executive Functioning and then Neurodivergent Mind is on our webpage. It's up there at the top. You can find that there. Also, it's I think there's a link on it on our Twitter as well. You go click onto it, you'll register, and then you'll be able to join in. It's free, and there's no obligations. But yeah, and then
one thing I should have mentioned earlier. I don't know why this is. I was just looking over the chat. I am subscribed to Roll20. I love it, and I love D&D Beyond too. They're great tools. Mood is a contextual factor. I should have said that earlier, that when you are feeling depressed, it becomes much more costly. That's a negative contextual factor. It becomes much more costly to do pretty much anything. When you're feeling happy and excited, that makes it less costly to do pretty much anything. So I should have put that out earlier, that that mood is an important contextual factor. If you can do a thing under normal circumstances, but you're struggling when you're depressed, well, that depression is a contextual factor.
And you can find more about that information on our previous cast about motivation and value. Yeah, so thank you guys all for joining us. We will see you guys next Wednesday.
Thank you.